She reached the front door and found them to be unlocked. Pushing the door open, Maggie was greeted by the sight of polished wooden floors and a string of doors on either side of the hallway that gave the interior the look of an old high school. The place was so silent, she expected some kind of ghost or other supernatural bullshit to come wandering through. There were 4 closed doors on the left wall that ended in a second hallway. On the right wall were 6 doors that ended at a window. Of the 6 doors, only one was open. In front of the open door lay a message handwritten on a dry erase easel that begged all newcomers to sign in first before they proceeded to the classroom. Considering I don't even know where the classroom is. Maggie entered the room behind the sign and was greeted by a desk occupied by the ugliest woman she had ever seen. It looked as if the woman had been hit by a truck, scattered to a million pieces, and then haphazardly glued back together again. One eye hung slightly below the other, wrinkles meandered all over her face and body, and her skin was a splotchy brown. The name tag on this misfortune read, Michelle, but Maggie was none too sure about this abomination's gender. "Can I help you?" Michelle had a voice of either a heavy smoker or a middle-aged man. Maggie couldn't decide which. The sign up front said to come here first. Maggie tried to find something to avert her eyes, but failing in doing so, was intent to stare at the sheet of names sitting in front of Michelle. "Sign here." Michelle jabbed a meaty finger toward the sheet Maggie was already staring at, causing it to shift slightly from its position. "Name, printed and signed, age and address." Maggie quickly skimmed the desk and found a coffee cup of pens, from which she extracted one and began scribbling. As she wrote her information down, she glanced at the list of names already written. There were 5 names already on it, none of whom she knew, and all in various colors of ink. She wondered if some had brought their own pens, or if Michelle here just liked to mix things up by putting every color pen she could find in the cup. Maggie had lucked out and drawn the black ink pen, and was only the second other person to have picked it. "Second door on the left. You still have 15 minutes. Michelle gruffly spoke as Maggie put the pen back into the cup. "Gods, I hope that never happens to me." As Maggie stepped back into the hallway, she was greeted by a silent stillness dispersed with muted whispers. The newly waxed floor creaked and popped with each step she took, and the sounds it made seemed to be louder than it should have been. She could imagine a crowd of school kids clomping up and down these wooden floors, laughing and screaming as they hustled to their schoolrooms. What it would have been like to have been in this place during its heyday. She didn't find that thought all that appealing. She had hated high school, opting to skip as much of it as possible, until she found herself no longer welcome to even pretend to attend. She didn't feel any remorse for her behavior, as she would have done it all again had she been given the opportunity. She moved quickly to the room Michelle had pointed out earlier. Inside the room there sat 3 rows of long tables lined with cheap plastic lawn chairs against the farthest wall, while a single table with 3 chairs sat closest to the door. A typical teacher's desk sat in the middle of the room with 3 blackboards behind it. All 5 of the people whom had signed the sign-in sheet before her were already seated. All 5 were females. 2 sat at the far back table and looked to be approaching 40, while the other 3 sat at the middle table and looked to have just reached 20. Maggie saw that both groups were already engaged in furious whispering between each other. Not wanting to interrupt them, she sat at the opposite end from the door at the front table and extracted the training book all students were instructed to buy before coming to class, followed by a notepad and pen. Might as well try the first day before you start skipping it the rest of the days.